miss the days of hardest bosses lists. Here's a list I've wanted to do for quite some time. I have played through every Mario game, at least the ones I care about, on the hardest difficulties so that I could make a more professional list. Well, except for the harder version of Bowser and Mario Odyssey, since getting the Power Mode in the darker side, which is mandatory to facing him, takes a lot of patience. I would have delayed this until the recently announced remakes come out, but I was already working on this, so I won't delay this more. The remakes probably won't make those bosses much harder anyway. The rules are that their difficulty depends on how long it took me to beat them, and one boss per game. Also, in games where you get ranks depending on how well you did in the boss fights, I didn't count getting the best ranking unless it actually unlocks something like in Yoshi's Island. So, let's go! Wow, the bosses where you get a rank on only qualifies if you unlock something in return rule goes into effect already. At the number 15 spot, we have Raphael the Raven. This boss is usually pretty easy. In Yoshi's Island, you'll have at the very least 10 seconds to grab Mario from a few feet away from you if you get hit in order to save yourself from dying, and there are no one-hit KOs in this fight, making it near impossible to lose. But when aiming to get 100%, one of the requirements is to stay with 30 stars. And in the boss fights, you have to pretty much beat them without getting hit once. Yeah, pretty much. In most of the boss fights, you can do certain tricks by bouncing your eggs and grabbing them back to make them have red eggs that release a couple stars when they hit certain things. Not this time! Here, you have no eggs. Also, the perspective takes a bit of time to get used to, which, granted, is actually pretty awesome, especially for a Super Nintendo and Game Boy Advance game, but man, this can throw a huge curveball at you. Also, if you don't beat him in a certain amount of time, he gains a new attack where he launches bolts out of his feet, which happen very suddenly and move fast, making dodging difficult. So getting through this whole fight without getting hit once might just make you cry out for mercy, especially when you find out your reward for getting 100% in all World 5's main levels. Wow, that was completely worth it. One of the things that people like about the post-game of Super Mario Odyssey is the ability to go to the Mushroom Kingdom once you beat Bowser. The nostalgic value, being able to play as Yoshi, and even being able to jump into portraits just like in Super Mario 64, which lets you face harder versions of bosses you've already faced. Now the most difficult of them all is Knucklotec. In order to cause damage, you have to get him to punch the ice to stun his hands so you can possess them and make him punch himself. But the fists land almost instantly after they start, so not only is it hard to lure them to the ice, it's also hard to know exactly when to move away. Move way too early and they won't punch where you want them to. Move too late and you'll end up as a knuckle sandwich. He'll also gain the ability to rain a bunch of icicles within a 3-yard range around you, so you're going to have to react fast, especially when you use his clapping attack that practically locks onto you. It's made even harder now that he has a bunch of infinitely respawning chinchos and you have to worry about in addition to the stuff that's always being thrown at you. So yeah, this knucklehead is hard. And if what other people say is anything to go by, it seems like there are quite a few people who agree with me on this being the hardest of the boss rematches here. Things are going to be pretty annoying in this list, because 40% of the entries are Bowser fights. The first one we have is the dreaded fight with him at the end of Super Mario 64. Up to this point, the fights with him only required you to throw him at one bomb. But now, things have changed. Now you'll have to throw him at 3 of them. I should be thankful you don't need to throw him at all the bombs like I was worried I'd have to, but nonetheless, this is still difficult. Now he can pretty much rain fire, and if you throw him the wrong way, part of your platform disappears. If you think that only having to hit him 3 times is easy, just you wait until you hit him the second time. Bowser, believe it or not, actually does something smart and destroys more parts of the platform until it's shaped like a star, with the points of the star facing away from the bombs, making your timing have to be absolutely perfect with throwing him the last time. The only thing keeping him from being any higher on the list is because you only have to worry about the platform's shape getting in the way once. But this is still not to be taken lightly. In Mario Party 4, Bowser really proves himself to be a party pooper. Because to beat Bowser, you have to fight your way through 5 challenges. The first one is all about getting these platforms with spinning fire traps. But since jumping is heavier in Mario Party series than it is in the main games, try to guess how that'll turn out. Next up we have a slide puzzle which can actually be solved rather quickly. What follows is another platforming segment with those annoying fireballs and platforms. After that, we have another slide puzzle, but this is easily harder than the first one, since now there are 9 squares instead of 4. You're going to have to pay attention to both the puzzle and the fire boomerangs that Bowser throws at you. At long last, you reach the final phase of it, where you have to hit the switches, but you have to line them up in such a way where Bowser ends up in the triangle they form. But since they don't take up as much space as you'd think they take up, that can make Bowser pretty hard to hit at times. But he's lower on the list because his attacks aren't as hard to avoid as you'd think they are. I bet we can all agree that Dino Piranha was pretty pathetic, but he seems to get harder every time. In the first fight with him, his weak spot is obvious and easy to hit, and you only have to hit him 3 times. So try this on for size. Fiery Dino Piranha is the same fight. He will coat the arena in fire, his tail is lit on fire so you have to wait until it douses, and he moves a lot faster. Still not hard enough? Let's bring him back in the sequel and see how you do against him at the end of a boss gauntlet. What's that? Still think you can handle him? Well, try having a time limit that carries over between all 5 of the fights. Since you have 5 minutes, you have to take roughly a minute to beat the bosses on average. At least you'd think it's that simple. Guess who you have to fight before this plan? That old demon known as Bouldergeist. He takes so long to beat, and because he creates more and more rocks to guard against your attacks, he'll leave you with even less time to take care of Fiery Dino Piranha. This is easily the hardest fight against Dino Piranha, but compared to the bosses in the next 2/3 of this list, we're just getting warmed up. See what I did? Warmed up because this boss... forget it. I hope you're not afraid of heights, because next up we have Bowser's Lovely Lift from Mario Party 7. In order to win, you have to raise the platform to the highest level by hitting all 4 dice blocks. The problem? Since they're, well, dice blocks, the amount of floors they go up at a time is randomized. That makes this battle partially luck-based, which is a really annoying mechanic. But don't worry, it's not just luck-based. You also have to deal with Bowser's attacks. The fireballs are pretty easy to dodge, but the missiles home in on you and go faster. When you get to the halfway point of this battle, Bowser Jr. will join in on the fun, forcing you to avoid both of their attacks at the same time, leaving you with less room to run around. They'll even shoot massive lasers that take up an entire column, and they move too. Oh, but you haven't even heard the best part. You can only take 1 hit before Bowser ends your game. I should be thankful this isn't an RPG boss, otherwise this would be practically unbeatable. From this point on, every boss on the list will be from an RPG game, so I hope you don't get tired really easily. And our first one of these is Black Bowser. Now that Bowser is powered by the black paint, his attacks are devastating. They deal a great amount of damage that, if not blocked, will take off about 1/5 of your HP. If you think that sounds like any other boss, then that's only the first phase. In the next phase, you attack him to make black paint fall off, but then you find out that when he attacks, the black paint that came off him goes back on, restoring his health. So now we have to do one more thing. Now Huey will try to absorb the black paint so Bowser can't regain it. But in order to do that, you have to guard his attacks. If you don't guard them, the damage you gave him in the last turn will be for nothing. So you'll have wasted your moves. How great! But it gets even worse. Huey can only withstand about 11 attacks. So you're going to have to focus on giving Bowser as much damage as possible in a single turn. But the more damage you inflict in a turn, the more paint that comes off him goes into his next attack, which makes his attacks even more powerful. And then his final attack, which makes you think he's going to use a super quick attack when he's actually going to use a relatively slow move, which can cause you to guard too early and make Bowser restore even more health than he had in the beginning of your last turn. This is how Bowser has painted himself into another spot on this list. Wow, I'm terrible. Great, we're already halfway through the list, and this is already our 5th Bowser entry. Thankfully, this one is a major improvement from Dream Team's final boss, since there's no more awesome villain to steal the show from, and there's no all-you-can-eat buffet in the middle of the fight to ruin the mood. But this one is no pushover either. In the first phase, you have to deal with 2 Bowsers for the price of 1. They can hide in their shells to negate all the damage you give them, but that's nothing compared to phase 2. This time, the 2 morph together to create an even worse Bowser. He can raise his defenses with his armor, and even though you can break it, when he regains it, it restores his health by a large amount. And what's more, when he has his helmet on, If you try to use one of your trio moves, he will instantly counter it with his own trio move. In this one, he turns you into sheets of paper when he breathes fire, which stay there for a long time, making dodging difficult. Sometimes he'll even try to throw off your timing by faking you out before he actually attacks you. He also has an attack where he flies after you, except you not only have to worry about Mario and Luigi, but also about Paper Mario, for he is the only one who can save the normal brothers from the long jump portions. Focusing on all three of your characters is a real pain in the neck in this game, so you'd better make sure to have great reflexes or you might just die. If by some remote chance you've been around when my hardest bosses list for my original channel was still up, you'll at least have a minuscule chance of remembering this boss being my #1 hardest boss in video games. Those were the days. Anyways, this list was based on how long it took me to beat those bosses, and it took me a whole week to beat Cackletta, but then I remembered that the only reason it took me that long was because I was really bad at the game when I first played it. But this boss is still nothing to underestimate. When this battle begins, you wake up with only 1 HP. Of course you can heal from it, but if your speed isn't high enough, she'll get the first turn. You'd better hope that she doesn't start with her arm swing or her dancing fire move, because those are way too hard to dodge. She will also gain more and more attacks as the fight goes on, including this devastating attack where she fires several energy balls at once. And it's hard to remember which one of her hands are weak against which one of your moves. Use the wrong move and her hands will heal. In the 3DS version, it's easier to tell which hands are weak to what move because they highlight the colors, and the energy balls don't require as much precise timing. But now Cackletta also gains a hand slap attack, which does require great timing. Nevertheless, this is no pushover. Partners in Time is what some of you might know as my favorite Mario RPG. And what better way to end it off than with a very challenging final boss. This boss is 5 phases. The first and fifth aren't that hard. So let's start with phase 2. Before you can hurt her, she creates a force field that has no real HP bar, only takes damage equal to the amount of times you hit her, and she can shoot thunderbolts from all over the place, so you need to have fast eyes. She'll also try to crush you with a big machine, and the awkward timing can make it hard. Then after you defeat her, it's her sister's turn to finish what the younger sister started. The elder princess Shroob has a numerous amount of attacks, and you probably won't even be able to keep track of all of them. And she can even heal too. But then, she enters her next form, and it is difficult. In order to stop her, you need to destroy all of her arms, her legs, and her crown to even get a few turns to attack her head, which already has 3000 HP. As such, this boss can take an hour to kill. That's not even counting the fact that these targets allow her to attack several times at once. You'd better have brought a lot of mixed flowers with you, otherwise you won't be the one coming out of this battle alive. If you remember that one quiz in Bowser's Castle in Paper Mario, you'd remember that something terrible might happen if you get enough losses. They weren't kidding, because you will end up face to face with the anti-guy unit. What? That's not a boss. Doesn't count. I'm disliking, unsubscribing, and flagging right now. Okay, please listen up. Some people don't count this as a boss. Well, it's a mini-boss. I personally count them as bosses. We all have different criteria. Besides, at least I'm not counting a random Hammer Brother as a boss. But I'm stalling. Let's get on to what makes this fight so difficult. You know about the anti-guys back in Shy Guy's toy box? They have 50 HP, which is high for Paper Mario standards, and their attacks will either give 10 or 12 damage if unguarded. So try facing 3 at once. That's a total of 150 HP, and the amount of damage they can give in one turn usually ranges from 27 to 36. That's insane! Now, I bet some of you are screaming at your monitors for me to paralyze, lower their attack, or put them to sleep. I don't waste money on sleep-inducing moves because they almost never work, and even though they have a higher chance of working here, that's not the intended way to defeat these guys. As for Zap Tap, not everyone spends their star pieces the same way, and lowering their attack isn't even the intended way to defeat these either. If you have trouble beating them without using these strategies, don't come crying to me. The Final Fantasy series are notorious for having difficult bosses. So what happens when you have their creator, Square Enix, get together with Nintendo? You get a taste of what these guys have to deal with. Culex is the most powerful boss in the game because he has access to some powerful magic with moves such as Meteor Blast and Dark Star. With 4 crystals on his side that all attack, he can attack 5 times in one turn. Not only that, but in total, Culex and his crystals have more health than both of Smithy's forms combined. The most annoying one is that Wind Crystal, which can cause annoying status effects, like Petal Blast, which turns all of your members into mushrooms, disabling all of their moves, while also restoring a bit of their health each turn, and Light Beam, which puts your party members to sleep. But even without the crystals, Culex still has that annoying ramming attack which he doesn't even telegraph, so it's near impossible to guard against it. Also, the level cap is lower than you may think, so you'll just have to make do with what you can do and hope that you can win. At the number 3 entry of this countdown, we have our next and thankfully last Bowser entry on the list. Bowser X is considered by many people to be one of the hardest, if not the hardest boss in the series. Even though I wouldn't give him the number 1 spot, he came awfully close. Bowser X has several attacks that might just make you want to smack your head in anger. He has this attack where he turns huge and breathes fire at you, and after you avoid it, he chases you and you have to jump over it again. But you're given like half a second to react. If you hit the fire, you get slowed down, making you uneven and making it even harder to dodge. He also has some attacks that go way too fast, which aren't much better than that fire. And whenever you use a brother's attack on him, he inhales it so you can't use it for a bit of time, leaving you with less and less moves to use against him until you get them back. And that's not even beginning to mention the turn limit. Another thing is how you have very limited items in this area. Though you can use the Mighty Meteor in the previous battles to get more items. But even then, this boss gave me quite some trouble. At least with the Anti-Guy unit, I was eventually able to beat them without using those strategies. But this boss took me a while even with my own strategy of getting more items. Eventually, after suffering through a lot of level grinding, I finally beat this boss. Then I found out about the challenge medal, which significantly increases your enemy's attack, HP, and defense. You can imagine how happy I was to find that out. There's an ongoing debate between who is the hardest boss in Thousand Year Door, either Bonetail or the Shadow Queen. And if you couldn't tell by the music I'm using, I find the Shadow Queen harder. Both bosses took me 4 days to beat, but the only reason Bonetail took me that long is because the level leading up to him takes over an hour, giving me less opportunities to lose against it. So Shadow Queen it is! This boss has 3 phases. The first phase will make your heart pound, but then in the second phase, she becomes invincible. You now have to survive 3 turns and she gets 2 arms that both attack you, letting her attack 3 times at once. So, do you just spam the guard command and mushrooms to survive this? Well, no. You have to attack her, even though that does nothing to her, so what's the point? Then in the last phase, your attacks actually do damage. But she can steal your HP and add it to her own. Not even Bonetail could do that. And once again, she can attack 3 times at once, so she's going to give you a lot of damage. Now, I have a confession to make. Challenge Metal Bowser X took me just as long to beat as the Shadow Queen did. So I settled on a tiebreaker for which one of the two I think is the more awesome villain. And if you know me, you'd know that I choose Shadow Queen over Bowser X any day. The only reason she is number 1 is because in this fight, the slots game has a higher chance of getting all shines, which fully restores you. Even then, it won't take much longer for her to get your health back down with her attack strength and separate arms. I wanted to believe that she was the hardest because the build-up to her pretty much screams hardest boss. The one boss that you'd least expect to be number 1 ended up surpassing her. That's right, it's Phantasma X. No Mario boss is officially taking me longer to beat than this boss has. If you get attacked by him, there's a good chance you'll be trapped in a nightmare. In it, you get chased by Phantasma through a room full of black holes. You have to jump over the black holes to reveal which one of them is the one you need to fall in to escape the nightmare. But while you're concentrating on trying to do that, Phantasma will blast you from behind, sending you into one of them. If you fall into the wrong one, you end up falling through a room full of torture devices, and you control your fall using gyroscope controls. So be prepared to put up with that a lot if you get hit by his attacks, which mind you can be pretty difficult to dodge. Especially when he divides himself into bats, forcing you to dodge every single one, making it hard to tell which ones fly at you or not, and when he hits you with shockwaves, and doesn't give you enough time to move out of the way. But even ignoring that, Phantasma can still take away Luigi and trap him in one of the orbs. So no Luiginary attacks until you save him. Did I mention he also mixes them up, making you have to follow the right orb? This wouldn't be so hard if some orbs didn't go behind him, making it easy to lose track. Once he loses about half of his HP, He goes to sleep and surrounds himself with a force field that will restore a lot of his health every turn until you destroy his orbs. So if he has a lot of them surrounding him, he'll restore too much health. And just like with all X bosses in this game and its predecessor, there's a turn limit. So there you have it. Phantasma X is my personal hardest boss in the Mario series.